Grab your wine. It's time for Rosé All Day and Julie's a Mess, where we talk about current events and living in an intersex life. And now, here's Julie.
Everybody, week 13 of Rosé All Day, Julie's a Mess on justjuleigh.com. If you haven't subscribed to us yet, please subscribe. Trying to grow the YouTube platform so I can have a broader reach when it comes to XXY and intersex. Somebody said my wig earlier was very Moira inspired from Schitt's Creek. It's been a very Schitt's Creek kind of week for me, so I'll run with that. I do like this breezy summer look. We're going to get to our guest in just a second, but let's break it down for everybody and talk about our wine selection this week. So my rosé this week is courtesy of Cupcake Wines, Cupcake Wineries. It's a Cupcake California rosé. It has that typical rosé color, a little bit of an amber color, not as pink. I've been drinking it thus far, and I like it. It's got kind of a peppery aftertaste. It's a little bit different. So it's light and fruity, but it has a nice peppery aftertaste. My guest tonight was saying I need to find a wine for a future episode called Yoga Wineries, and I made the joke, wow, that's a yoga I could really get behind. I mean, that's a yoga that I could really master. So I'm going to be checking out that wine in the future. I am drinking my wine tonight out of my special XX Wine Rosé All Day, Just Juleigh, justjuleigh.com insulated tumbler. You can find this and other merchandise on justjuleigh.com under the store tab. It is $34.99, which is a little pricey. I'm not Barbara Streisand, but $5 of every sale of that tumbler will go back to tumbler. Will go back to XXY research here in the United States, which is duly needed. Also, we have set up a Patreon account for justjuleigh.com. You can Google us over on Patreon. And if you like this podcast and you want to see it go further, please donate. You can donate as little as $5 a month. That will get you special access to our podcast before and after as we move forward. It will give you special access and question times for me if you would like to have a personal one-on-one. So check out patreon.com and justjuleigh.com. All right, guys, let's get to our guest, my very good friend all the way from Las Vegas, Nevada, Jesf Benedict.
Hi, Julia.
Hi,
how are you?
Good. How are you?
Oh, I can't complain. It's a little warm, but other than that, we're doing awesome.
It is warm today. I think we're getting into the summer hot months. I love your intersex flag that you're rocking behind you. For those of you that don't know or are new to what it means to be intersex, that is our official flag. It is a yellow background with a purple circle in the middle. So if you ever wondered if the intersex community has a flag, we do. And it's right behind Jess for your pandering. Jess, how do we know each other? Tell the people listening and everybody watching tonight, how do we know each other?
Well, it was a little over a year ago, I think, that I run Intersex Connect for the Las Vegas Center, LGBT Center. And we were looking for some guests and stuff, and I found some of your information. And we also spoke to somebody that was your representative at that time. And we arranged for you to come out to Las Vegas and do a presentation live with our Intersex Connect group. And then COVID hit, and you never made it.
Wah, wah. That's so true. So my good friend Tiffany Calise and my director for my podcast, Kevin Major Howard, had spoken to you and set up this great way for me to come out there and not only talk to Las Vegas and tell my story, but also we were hoping to have some investors available to witness that as well. And so, I'm getting some weird feedback, I think maybe on your end. But anyway, due to COVID, that didn't happen, which was a bummer because I would still like to be able to come out and do that. We also had a wonderful meeting earlier this fall. I invited you to be a part of Florida Equality's virtual programming on intersex and trans and what it meant to meet at that intersection of trans and intersexuality. And we got to do that with fellow advocates in the intersex community. So that was great as well. And then you said you wanted to be on the show this week. So here we are.
There you go.
So, yeah, it's great. I'm going to try something real fast. Yeah, so it's definitely on your end, but it's okay. We will figure that out, and if we didn't have it before the show, so we will just try and work with that as we go forward. So, Jesf Benedict, let's talk about current events. There's a lot to unbox this week. You reminded me when we were talking before the show that Las Vegas had a plane crash yesterday. It was a military plane crash, and I believe the pilot died, you said. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I live about a mile away from the airbase, and I never even noticed it until I saw it on Facebook. So, but he was going over the residential neighborhood that's right across the street from the base, and he missed and landed in somebody's backyard. But he was the only one that was injured or died or anything like that. And big old fire, and it totally screwed up traffic all around here because that road's gonna be closed for days. But it was quite the big deal at the time. Everybody was going to look, and there's a lot of fuel on that airplane apparently. It was amazing that nobody got hurt.
Yeah, the reason that reminded me too, I read an article this morning about a Southwest flight attendant who had their teeth knocked out on Sunday on a flight from Sacramento to San Diego. And then in that same article, it's talking about flight attendants becoming more and more pressured and in danger on flights. And I thought, really? Like, now we have to worry about our flight crews. It's been a couple of wonky years.
People need to relax.
They just need to chill. Get a drink on that plane and take a pill and
smoke a big fat one.
Smoke a big fat one. You can't smoke on a plane because of what do they call them? Aviation rules, right?
Yes.
Smoking, but
they should have like a smoke up section before you get on the plane.
Right? Or maybe
you can get a little high.
Do an edible before you get on a plane.
There you go.
Chill out. I'm not a big drinker. I don't want to sound like an alcoholic, but I do like to get an occasional drink on a long flight because it helps. It helps you kind of relax and not freak out as much. Big news story this week. Somebody said Joe Tiger King's last tiger was rescued or gotten out of his care. But then I noticed that there was a story today that's running that a law professional from an El Paso law firm was caught at the El Paso Zoo. She snuck into the spider monkey enclosure.
I heard that.
And they found her behind the waterfall trying to befriend the spider monkeys. What is going on?
I have no idea. Everybody's lost their mind again.
And I thought, she's a law professional? Like that law firm is probably not going to get any work in the next couple of months.
They already said they fired her.
Yeah, but they're going to have to do a lot of PR to kind of cover that up.
Yes. These are the kind of lawyers we got.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
They're animal lovers.
I get it. I love animals too, but as somebody else said, that's just stupid. Like, that's just stupidity. And you would think she would know better. You would think she would know, especially knowing law and the rules of breaking and entering and trespassing and
that. Well, some guy broke into an elephant thing with his 2-year-old about a month ago. And I don't know, he wanted to do a selfie. They put him in jail and took his kid away, but dang.
They should put him in jail. And they're lucky in these situations. I mean, even though these animals are in captivity, they're still animals.
Oh, yeah, the guy was like 10 feet from getting stomped on.
I think you have to remember it was a long time ago, but not so long ago that John Brashow was the trainer at SeaWorld that was killed by one of the shamus. So it does happen. You are in their space and it does happen. Looks like somebody named Maria is trying to connect with us, but Maria, we do not, this show is usually just us, just me and my guest. So it looks like you're trying to connect and we're not going to be able to add you to the show. We do have some people coming and speaking to us this evening. Charles Richardson is saying hello, room. Russell John Associates is saying hi. Hi, room, and Charlie Blair. So hopefully some people will start coming in and chatting with us. We will try and get to your questions if you have any for myself or Jess. So now we're going into a section called Julie's a Mess. Now look, this is the 13th episode. So by now you should be getting a handle on what goes on in the show. Julie's a Mess is where I will tell a story from my illustrious past, and I will stop halfway through the story and allow our guest to finish based on how they know and what they know about me and maybe how they've gotten to know me over the last year or all the years that we've known each other. So I'm going to do it a little bit different this week. Charlie, for those of you in chat, Blair, Charlie, and also for Jess, any suggestions for a story? Anything from my past you want to hear?
High school prom.
Oh, high school prom. I'll tell you my high school prom story. I mean, it's kind of sad, but I'll tell it. So high school prom, I was working at Walt Disney World as a tour guide on the backstage studio tour at Disney MGM Studios. And my high school prom, I went to a lot of dances in high school because you would go to junior, senior. It was a junior, senior prom because our high school was so small. So I gone the previous year and Blair, that'll be a story for next week, maybe. I just got the job. I don't want to get fired for telling my goods so soon, but we'll talk about that next week. But that's good for next week, Blair. She wants to know about the Family Dollar meth head wedding. So anyway, back to the senior prom. I thought I was gay in high school, and I wanted to go have a good time, but I didn't want to ask a girl that maybe knew that or thought that I had a romantic interest. And I had met a girl at work who was older than me, and she never got to go to our high school prom. So I thought, well, this will be great. I'll take her. I'll ask if she wants to go. She'll finally get to experience the prom. I was no schlub, like I was cute in high school. I thought, we'll have a lot of fun. We were friends at work. And she looked like Reba McEntire. And in high school, I had a huge Reba McEntire crush, like celebrity crush. I just thought Reba McEntire hung the stars and the moon. And this young lady looked just like Reba. And as we got ready for prom and the weeks kind of progressed, she told me that she found a gorgeous hunter green taffeta ball gown. Like, and it was a bridesmaid's dress, I think, but I didn't care. She looked stunning in it. I mean, looked stunning in it. And we go to prom, and all the girls at prom that were seniors were in what I call pageant gowns. They were in the heavily beaded gowns that, you know, they looked like they were competing in the 1984-85 Miss America pageant, like just poofy shoulders and just heavily beaded. And I went to a wealthier school in Florida, so the girls definitely spent money on their prom wear. And we had been there maybe 20, 25 minutes, long enough to have our pictures done and long enough for me to run into some other friends. And she came up and found me and was just in tears. And I said, "What's wrong? Like, what's going on?" And she said, "That girl over there," and she pointed to her, and I knew who the girl was, came up to me in the bathroom and said, "You look horrible. That dress is just ugly. Why would you, I mean, just shredded her." Very ugly stepsister moment for her. What do you think I did? Finish the story for us.
Let's see. You probably gave her a hug, and then you went over there and told the other girl that she was out of line and gave her a piece of your mind.
I mean, yes, I did end up doing all that, but not the night of prom. So the night of prom, I was all about PR control and just trying to make sure the girl had a nice night and that she was valued. So we left. I was like, I don't owe any of these people anything. Even though my dad was the president of the high school, I was like, I don't owe any of these people anything.
There you go.
So I told a friend we were leaving, and if they wanted to come, they could. And I asked her if she was hungry, and she said she was. And I said, "Do you want to go get a burger and go have fun? And we'll go find some fun things to do in Orlando." I think we even went back to Disney that night and used our employee discount and got in and like went and watched the fireworks. And we were dressed for the nines, but I was like, live a little. Who cares? You look amazing. Let's rock it. You know what I mean? And we had a lot of fun. The following Monday, I went up to the girl that had said something. And I tapped her on her shoulder, and she was a senior, and she turned around and she was like, "What?" And I said, "You looked great on prom." And she goes, "Thank you." And she was like, "I love my dress, blah, 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 blah." And I said, "But then you did something that totally tanked your whole look and made you very ugly." And I said, "You singled out a friend of mine at prom and told her that she looked atrocious and that her dress was ugly and that she shouldn't have even have come out to prom that night." I said, "In that moment, you showed your true colors." And I said, "That's what you need to work on when you go to college and when you get out into the world. That's what you really need to focus on, is kindness is free. And you may think that you have looked so great in the mirror before you went to prom, but you're very ugly. And that's a characteristic that you don't want to carry on in life." And I said, "You owe her an apology. She probably won't get it, but shame on you. Shame on you, because that was, whether those were your insecurities or you were having a rough night that night, I don't know, but you don't go somewhere, especially on I said, "She never got to go to prom. And not that I owe you her story. she never got to go. And that's why I brought her to this one. And you destroyed that.
Yeah, and had she responded to that?
She kind of looked at me with her mouth kind of open. And then I said, and you might want to close your mouth because you're catching flies, bitch. And I walked away. And it's sad because I know her sisters, and her sisters are kind. And I knew her mother, and her mother was amazing and was a teacher at the school. And I thought, I hope she's changed. I don't know her as an adult, but you hope that people change. And
yeah, I guess that's not all about how you were raised, is it? Some of it's just you're a mean, miserable person.
Yes. Yeah. Let's see. Blair says, a question for both Jules and Jesf is, what is the biggest change or difference you are making with your voice and story, and a specific example of whose life you may have made better besides mine? Aw, Blair, thank you. You want to take that one, Jess? We were going to talk about it a little bit later, but go ahead and answer it now.
All right. So I'm an intersex advocate, and I've been working on legislation for like the last 5 or 6 years, trying to push that and get people on board with that. But the Society of Pediatric Urology is going against us, and they have a $51 million budget, and I don't have a budget. So after years of doing that, and anytime an intersex bill goes through, they make sure there's the exception for the mental health of the parents. And I can't get rid of the exception for the mental health of the parents, because if you have to have surgery on your child for your mental health, then you should be the one going to the doctor, not your child. But so since then, I've been working on normalizing intersex around the world. I put together a YouTube channel, or not a YouTube video that's on the Center Las Vegas website, as well as a TikTok, trying to give the most simplest, accurate description of what intersex is. A specific example of whose life I may have made better. There's quite a few of them, because in the intersex community, it's a very lonely place until you find out there is an intersex community. You are made to feel that you are a monster and that you are an abnormal human being and you don't belong anywhere. And having found intersex people that didn't know that there was other intersex people, and bringing them into a group with many intersex people into it, almost every one of them has cried and been so thankful to find that they are not alone, and they're not out there on some island of intersex, that they're the only person on the island.
I think a lot of people feel that sometimes being intersex, we're on the island of misfit toys.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people will get that reference from Rudolph and the Claymation series that come out every Christmas. But it is very easy to feel that way. And it is very easy because you and I were talking about earlier, there is not a clear-cut pattern for what intersex is.
Well, yes, they haven't done a lot of studying on it. You know, they've come up with what little they've done. There's 33 different hormonal differences that cause intersex or create an intersex person. And there's 10 different ways the X and the Y combine, creating an intersex person. So there's at least 43 different ways that you become intersex. And that's after they've gone through and tried to cut out as many as they can from the medical society's point of view. They're always, well, you know, hypospadias is an intersex. And it's like, yes, it is. And, you know, so they always try and, well, PCHS is not, and intersex. And it's like, yes, it is. And so there's a lot of people out there that like, well, I have this, but I'm not intersex. It's like, well, actually you are. Just because they tried to exclude you doesn't mean you're excluded. And no, you don't have to go stand in the corner.
True. Hi, Rick. It looks like Rick Johnson has joined us. Do you know a Rick Johnson?
I don't think I do.
I don't think I do either. But welcome, Rick.
Hi, Rick.
Welcome for joining tonight. We love it. We are going into something called 5 questions. This is where I get to ask our guests 5 questions each week, and they get to respond in kind. And sometimes that spirals off into other questions and other topics. So we like to just go with the flow. I'm going to ask Jesf if he could tell the viewers and to tell the people listening, what is your origin story? How are you intersex?
Oh, well, that's an interesting story there. I was literally born a hermaphrodite. I had male and female genitalia. And when I was born, they told my parents that they had to decide whether I was going to be a boy or a girl. And my parents disagreed on whether I should be a boy or a girl. So I went home and lived a normal life for 4 months while my parents got a divorce because they were so strongly adamant on their own decisions. And the parent that got custody of me and with the other children got to decide which sex I would be surgically assigned. But for that 4 months, there was no extra medical interventions or anything that had to happen so that I could just be a normal baby. And, I kind of resent the fact that after 4 months, my mother never went, "Oh, he's perfect. I'm not going to change this child." But she was convinced that she had given birth to Satan. And so, but it's when you're born with the condition I was, which they call extreme hypospadias with micropenis, because who's going to go out in public and talk about that and say, I'm a hermaphrodite and this is my diagnosis? Because nobody's going to do, oh, well, here I am. Anyway, but that is a diagnosis of what they were looking at. They were looking at hypospadias and they were looking at a micropenis. And nothing says why I was born that way or anything like that. And no insurance company will do anything to help me discover why I was born that way because it's not deemed medically necessary. I haven't had to know up until now, and why is it going to make a difference? So that's the short story.
Well, I don't think you're Satan. I've known you for a while, so I'm glad that you're here, and I'm glad that you're telling your story. That's a big part of justjuleigh.com, and even my story is that I tell people all the time, my story is no more important than your story. The fact is that we're telling our story in an effort to change perceptions and the future for all those that are intersex along with us. And there's so many in our community that are afraid to talk or don't want to share or have been made ashamed or all of that. And so the fact that you and I get to have very public platforms to talk about our differences, that's great. So thank you for sharing that with us. You and I have been on platforms before and in virtual rooms before where they talked about unnecessary surgeries, which is happening in a rapid sequence to our young of the intersex community. Why do you feel it's important to end that? Why is it important to end unnecessary surgeries, in your opinion?
Well, I mean, first of all, cosmetic surgery on an infant is just wrong in any way. If your child was an infant and you knew that they were going to have your nose, would you have them have their nose fixed when they were an infant? Or would you wait and let them grow up and decide whether or not they wanted to have their nose fixed? And these surgeries are, I don't want to get too graphic, but they're not very good at it. I can't feel half of what they left behind. I have very little control over those situations. and there's a lot of pain, and I can pee in a urinal and on the person to my left at the same time because I have more than one place to pee from. And that's after 7 surgeries. Also, they say that the children don't remember these surgeries and that we need to do them early so they won't remember and they'll go with their assigned gender. I remember so much of it, it's not even funny. Back in the 60s when they believed that children couldn't feel pain, so at no time was I ever given anything for pain. They gassed me so I wouldn't move during surgery with ether gas, and I remember that vividly. I even remember paying for the glasses of like 3 different people because I hurt so many people when they tried to give me ether gas. And but children do remember that. Children need to have self-determination. You can't tell how that child's going to identify. And if they don't need the surgery to sustain life, then they should be allowed to decide whether or not they're going to have that surgery.
I agree. I think that, and people often ask us this question all the time when we do go and speak and tell our stories. And I've always said, look, so many things can happen during your adolescent years. And I think it's different. I think, we have to support the parents in some ways of saying, yes, there may be a medical reason that stems that you have to look at that point in time. But in most situations, that's not happening. And in most situations, I think you should allow the kid to hit puberty and having knowledge of what their body is going through, and then sit down with them and say, look, this is what the medical community is saying. What is your belief on what's going on in your body? How do you want to move forward? Because it is very easy to change things early on and then affect that life for the rest of their being. And
well, yeah, because I could never be put back the way I was.
no,
Or I could never choose the other sex either. Because
right.
of the way they did the surgery, I have no option.
And you may, not necessarily in your case, but you may be really affecting the mental of these children as well, because you're doing something that's permanent that they may not have ever have asked for, or may hinder their ability to have a lasting relationship with somebody of the sex they choose. Or maybe they could have had kids and now that's not on the table. Or maybe there's so many things that they're not looking at, but they are choosing because it's easier on them if they say, pick a gender. I'd even heard from people that doctors would say, pick a gender. It'll make it so much easier on you socially if you just pick a gender for your kid.
Yeah, that's what they do. They scare the parents into it. They're like, well, your child's going to get bullied and beat up and all this stuff. And, how are you going to explain it to people? And what are people going to say? And so you really need to pick one. And, the doctors, it's a $2 billion industry right here in America. So, the doctors are going to come up with the best story they can to convince you that you should have that child surgically altered. And that's why they keep the exception in there for the mental health of the parents, because then they can say, well, so the parents can bond with their child, we need to do this surgery. And I'm sorry, if you have a child and you can't bond with them because they weren't born your idea of perfect, then you really shouldn't be having children.
I was raised Christian. I know a lot of people that are raised sometimes in a religion falter and fall out for whatever reason. I still believe God doesn't make mistakes because that's how I was raised. I also believe that we are not necessarily put here for our parents. We're not put here for our parents. So I feel like every soul is released into the universe and put on earth for their own journey. Yeah. I feel like we're given to the parents we're given to because maybe we need that strong basis, or they're going to raise us. But I've always said to my parents, my journey is my journey, and it has no direct reflection on your journey, because your journey is your journey. Mm-hmm. The way the world works, hopefully my parents will age out before I do, and they'll pass on, and they'll meet their maker, and they'll go on, and that's their journey. My journey doesn't have, so for me to come into the world and for you to turn around and be like, oh, it's going to affect my journey, let's cut his penis off and give him a vagina and raise him female, you've now screwed up my journey.
That big time.
So my parents didn't do that. Thankfully, I was born in 1975 in Alabama, and the doctors just didn't have any knowledge on, one, intersex, but certainly not XXY. So I kind of went under the radar, which was a blessing because I survived. But doctors have come back and said to my parents later on in life, he shouldn't be here. She shouldn't be here. You should have termed her or termed him. And my parents were like, we never would have done that. So in a way, somebody said the other day, you're really a miracle baby. And I went, I'm a miracle baby in the fact that nobody was able to terminate me. Sure. but it shouldn't be happening anyway. I mean, that it shouldn't be happening. So
well, that's the way it is with the intersex now, because they're coming up with blood tests to test for like CHS and things like that. That they can test through the mother's blood to see if the child has it, so that they can make sure they have an abortion before that child is born.
Right.
And there's places like California and Hawaii where 70 to 86% of those children were aborted when they found out.
2017, I've shared this before on TikTok, 2017 in America, 65% of new parents that were going to have an intersex baby of some kind and advised to terminate due to scare tactics, 65% in 2017 did.
That's horrifying.
Horrifying. And people would think, oh, 65% is not a big number. And you think, really? Because 2% of the world's global population is intersex. We've heard numbers from 1.7 all the way up to 2%.
Yeah.
That's over 153.4 million people. And that's 153.4 million people that made it through not being terminated. So when you think about it in that scope, it's a lot of people.
Well, the other way to think about it is that last year was the first year that we actually had a drop in the number of babies born from the year before. But last year there was 3 million. I wrote it down earlier today because I was doing my pamphlet, but I don't have it in front of me. But there was over 3 million babies born. 1.7% as 60,300 intersex children were born last year. So if you want to take your 25% off of that 60,000, that's about 13,000 abortions for intersex children that were performed last year alone. So 13,000, I don't want to get too rude because we're all in friends here, but if you could pile those up and say these are the 13,000 lives that were lost because you were afraid of intersex, that'd be a really big pile.
Or because you're pushing that agenda that they're just two genders, which they're not, which we know firsthand because we're intersex, and I find all the time people on TikTok, I think it's funny, will come back and try and re-educate me, and I'm like, I'm intersex. I know what I'm talking about. Let's go on to another question. Blair wants to know, what's your relationship with your parents like? You'd mentioned earlier that your mother kind of felt like you were Satan's spawn, or is that relationship better? Did it ever get better?
It never got better, and they both passed before I found out I was intersex. Had they still been alive after I found out I was intersex and I found out they had surgery, I would not have handled it well, and it's probably really good that they passed away before I found out. But as far as my relationship with my mother, I was a very feminine boy because she decided on boy. And so she had my brother take me out and toughen me up. And, anytime I got hurt or anything, it was like, yeah, fine, whatever. And she was an alcoholic and she was very violent. So the first chance I had, I dropped out of high school, moved out of her house, and never went back, and probably talked to her 20 times before she died.
Well,
so not good, I guess.
not good. But I would like to think that maybe if they were still here, they would have come around. My parents struggled. I think struggle with society. I think all parents kind of struggle with norms that society presents. I think mine, my dad, when I found out I had to transition, my dad said, I'd rather lose you in 15 to 16 years as my daughter than to lose you in 5 years as my son. So he's kind of come around. My mom struggled with it a lot too. They're always behind me in all of my interviews and because I tell people all the time, I think especially for intersex individuals, you are in the same storm, but in very different boats. And I think that parents will do anything that they can to protect you, but they are still human and they still come across a lot of criticism in whatever they do. And I think that's got to be hard on some level. I don't have children. You don't have, you said you have a child. Maybe you can kind of talk to us about that and just, but hopefully I would like to hope that if your mom and dad had been around past you finding out, that they would have embraced it on some level.
If I didn't punch him. Oh. Because that's my first thought. Like, hey, Mom, punch her in the neck. Oh.
Well, my dad always said, somebody asked my dad, oh my gosh, you probably would have killed him, all the things you went through. My dad said, I'm pretty sure he wanted to kill us a few times too. So
those days, they happen. I'm not going to deny it.
Okay, Rick has a question for both of us. He says, I have a question for both of you. Has being intersex made it difficult for the two of you in the dating world?
Not for me, really, because women seem to really like a feminine man. One that can cook and clean and likes doing housework and stuff like that. And I love it. And so I've been married 24 years. And we have a son that's 22, turns 23 tomorrow. And finding out that I was intersex in the middle of our relationship almost destroyed it. And we've been through like everything. But this was almost the last straw. But we did get through it. It was difficult. There was things that were said that people shouldn't say to each other. But we did get through it, and we're still married and going strong. So.
Congratulations on still being married, and happy birthday to your son tomorrow. Happy early birthday. While we're talking about birthdays, my good friend Mary, who was our guest a few weeks ago, she's turning 50 this week. So happy birthday, Mary D.
Yeah, Mary.
For dating, for me, when I was growing up as a male and thought that I was a gay male, I always got, you're cute, but I didn't have a lot of relationships. I think I had maybe one. But in this form as Juleigh, I'm beating them away with baseball bats. Like, my dance card is full. My picker is broken. I don't always pick the right guy. But I am having the most fun of my life. And I'm dating everything from young college kids all the way up to established elderly. I wouldn't even say elderly, but men in their 50s and 60s. I'm having a lot of fun. And I find that if you are with the right person, they love you and want to be with you because of who you are as a person and not so much what you're operating with on the outside or inside of your body. So most of the men that I have engaged with in the last 2 years, 3 years have said, "You're all woman to me, and I love being with you, and you're fiery and fun." And so I think you have to know where to look. I think some people in our community are unsure of where to go to find people. I think that society is changing, so I think that people are not so closely knitted to the vest on who they want to date. I've always said when it comes to two people dating, those two people are in a relationship together. So if Joe Blow down the street doesn't understand, that's on Joe Blow, because Joe Blow's not having sex with the two in the relationship, and he's not paying the two's bills, and he's not going to barbecues with. So, I mean, really it has to do with the person that's in the relationship with you. And for that reason, I'm finding a lot that are very interested in me for me, and it hasn't been an issue for me.
That's awesome.
Okay, let's ask a fun question. You
Okay.
ready? If money was no option, Jess, and you could travel anywhere in the world for a week, where would you want to go and why?
That's a hard one because I've already been to most of them. But probably somewhere I haven't been, I'd probably want to go to the Orient. And I wouldn't want to just label one country, but I'd like to travel through the Oriental countries for a week. That would be a good time.
That would be a lot of fun. I've heard great things about the Orient. I think it'd be fun even to go on a train through some of these places.
Absolutely.
That would be so much fun and take the pressure off of driving and having to get places. Just go. I've always said I want to go to Greece. So I would like to go to Greece, maybe on a yacht, do the whole Aristotle Onassis type vacation plan, and be like Jackie O and just sit on the back of a yacht in the middle of the Mediterranean. That would be a lot of fun.
Right.
Okay.
I've been in London for 2.5 years, so I got a lot of the European countries checked off.
I love London. Where was one of your favorite places to go in London?
I spent a lot of time in Hyde Park. I don't know if you know what Whiteley's is, big department store. Okay, I live like 4 blocks from Whiteley's, so we'd go down there and hang out and food, and that's like 5 blocks from Hyde Park. So
we should take a trip back to London, you and I and your wife. We should go. I love London. The last time I was there was in 2015, and it was at the end of a 3-month trip for me. No. And I ended up losing part of my toe. But the interesting thing, so I didn't get to experience a lot of London. And I wanted to go on the Jack the Ripper tour because, I'm bougie like that. But I love the people and I love the culture. And what little I did get to experience, I really liked. And I thought I could probably thrive in a town like London. I could probably do really well here.
Yeah, hard to stay sober.
Well, yeah. People get trolleyed. I learned that word this week. I thought that was hilarious. Somebody was like, I met a man in London and he was completely trolleyed. And I was like, what's that mean? And they were like, he was 3 sheets to the wind. And I was like, oh my gosh, I love that slang. I love their slang. So to say you can get trolleyed in London.
There you go. Well, let's see if we can do the Circle Line pint tour.
Yes.
You go around the Circle Line and you get off at each stop, drink a pint, get back on, go to the next stop, drink a pint, get back on. It's happened so much that they actually start looking for people that are doing that so they can stop it.
Oh my God. I'm down. Let's do it. We'll grab my friend Charlie and Blair. We'll take your wife. We'll all go to London. London town, here we come.
There you go.
I love it. Okay. So, Jess, it is about 6:49. We're doing great on time this week. Tell us what you're passionate about, what's going on in your life right now, anything going on at the center. Just, this is your time to shine.
Well, you should know by this part of the conversation that I'm super passionate about stopping unnecessary intersex surgeries. And I'm trying to put together information packets. I had some before, but they seemed a little bit negative. talked about, to stop the mutilation and unnecessary and do no harm. And I was like, maybe we need to make it a little bit more pleasant. So I took a lot of the script that I used in my YouTube video and turned it into the pamphlet, explaining what intersex is to people, so that it's more of a Intersex 101 pamphlet rather than these doctors suck, stop the surgeries kind of pamphlet. I am going to the Well Baby event in San Diego in September, and I'll be joining the table with the anti-circumcision people, because that's also another unnecessary childhood mutilation. And man, what else we got? Trying to get somebody to put me on TV, but I'm not going to talk about that because it's not far enough along to even pretend that it's happening. What else we got? We got Pride coming up. It'll be in Henderson, which is a suburb of Las Vegas.
Yeah.
And out at the lake. So that'll be cool. What else we got going on? I have no idea.
Do you feel like when we talk about Pride, which sometimes I feel like we get left out every year in Pride, but do you feel like we are starting to get a little more of a footing in the LGBTQ community? Do you feel like people are starting to recognize us as individual?
We're getting there here. I got to be honest, when I came to the LGBTQ Center of Las Vegas, they had no idea. There's one person there that ever heard of intersex. And so after 2 years now, it's very integrated into everything they do. And I've spent a lot of time getting in people's faces and saying, when you start including the intersex people, then I'll know you're serious. But Pride, the last time it was actual people, like the year before last, they did let me give a speech explaining what intersex was. Not my finest speech, but I got the point across to somebody. I know I did.
I think people are learning. I think that even just my rise and sometimes fall on TikTok is showing that people are engaged in learning about the intersex community. I think one of the big things is that people just have had no idea that we even existed, which when we share stories about how marginalized we are and what the medical community has done to us for the past 60 years, and when we share stories on Facebook and different platforms, it's easy for me to understand why somebody that's dyadic or has never heard of intersex, why that is. I think it's great that we're able to do things like this. I think it's great.
I was that person, so I totally understand when people are like, what? No way, you're full of crap. But when it was my own body, I couldn't deny it. And I started looking into it further and further. And if it wasn't my own body, being the person I was before I found out, I don't know if I'd have believed it. I would prove it. And, they would. And it would blow my mind and totally destroy me again. But it's like and I don't like to disparage people, but people in the trans community, when people come up and ask them innocent questions, I think are innocent questions, they just want to know. And you're unique. It's like asking somebody about their tattoo, I think. But they turn around and they get venomous and yell at people and how dare you and all of this. And when that happens to me, I turn around and I try and explain to them. They learn so much about intersex in the next 5 minutes. They're like, damn, I've never talked to another person again. Oh. But I totally understand when people don't get it. Because most of my life I didn't get it.
Yeah, I agree with that. I've always said, just because it's not in somebody's wheelhouse doesn't mean they don't have the capacity to understand it and move forward. And that's why we tell our stories.
Yeah. Well, my first doctor in Las Vegas, when he met me, was stunned, and I came loaded with information for a new doctor, as I always do. At the end of my appointment, he went home and he never returned. 3 months later, on my follow-up appointment, they say, "You're not going to break this doctor too, are you?"
Wow.
But they actually send a welfare check to his house to make sure he's okay. And he's fine. He just ain't going back.
I had a similar situation where I had an incident last October where I lost a toe, and I went to a small ER in the town that I'm now living in. And the attending doctor, who was one of the oldest doctors at this small hospital, she sat in front of me and just cried. And I said, "Why are you crying?" And she said, "You really shouldn't be here." And I should have been offended, but
Yeah.
I didn't find offense in it. But I do remember saying to her, "Why not? Is every life not viable?" And she was like, "Well," she goes, "I just, and she kind of stuttered and she thought about it." And I left that night and I was kind of offended the next day, but I thought, whatever. And then I saw her about 4 months later out at the grocery store, and she walked up to me and she goes, "I owe you an apology." She goes, "The fact that you are thriving is a testament to the fact that we should not be aborting intersex babies." And I said, from your mouth to God's ears.
That.
That. Okay, so this is the part of the show where my guest gets to ask me one question about my medical journey and my life that they've always wanted to ask, or that they've always wanted to know and maybe haven't had a way to ask before or weren't sure how to approach me. So Jess, the floor is yours. Go ahead and ask me that question.
All right. I had a question when you told me I was going to have to do this. I had one, and now I can't think of what it was. So now I'm going to have to come up with another one. So in your journey, your medical journey, when you first found out you were intersex, were you relieved or horrified?
My journey's different, and I found out at 17. So everybody always wants to know, when did you find out? And I said, I found out at 17. I went to go have a football physical because I was playing football in high school. And we switched from a single A division to a double A. So we all had to go get physicals done. And I had gone to get a physical, and the doctor came out. And from what my mom has said, the doctor came out to my parents and said, "He shouldn't be here." And they said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Well, had you known what we know in the 70s, they would have asked you to terminate, and you shouldn't be here." And my mom said, "We never would have done that. We would never have done that." And he said, "Okay, well, just know that moving forward, life's not going to be great for him. It probably hasn't already been great for him. He's probably struggled a lot. He's probably been on the autistic spectrum and the learning disabilities and slow to walk." And my parents were like, "Yeah, he's been on all of that." I think for me, I was 17. And when they told me, my mom and dad were like, "This doesn't mean you're gay. You have an extra chromosome, but it doesn't really mean anything. We're going to put you on testosterone, but it's really just to kind of help masculinize you out." And that's what they were being told. But I was literally at the point of, I'm going to college. Fuck all of y'all. Like, fuck every single, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you. Like, I didn't care at that point. My life had been, I'd struggled so much growing up, and it was for me, it was a relief that I hadn't killed myself or somebody else, that by the time I found out, I was like, I'm going to college. and I'm going to experience what life is meant to be, and I'm going to do my thing, and I'm going to be a great gay man, and I'm going to end up on Broadway, and I'm going to be on television, and fuck all of you, because I was being told it didn't mean anything. So for me, it wasn't a relief. It was just like, oh, okay.
Was it
all right. Because there was no information in the 90s about what it meant to be intersex anyway. There wasn't. And so it wasn't until I was in my 30s and I was in LA and I was on Glee and The Mentalist and Criminal Minds, and I was living my best life doing exactly what I said I was going to do, that my body started to fall apart, and that my body started to fight within itself, and that I was getting sick easier, and there weren't any answers. And then I went to Europe for 3 months and I lost a toe. And it was that doctor at Colchester Hospital that said, you realize all this is going on in your body because you're XXY and you're intersex. And I went, this is all connected? And he said, yeah. And he goes, I implore you to go home. When you go home and you're healing, I implore you to eat everything you possibly can on XXY and Klinefelters and intersexuality. Eat it like your life depends on it. He goes, because it's probably going to save you.
That was a good doctor.
That was a great doctor. And when I came back to the United States, he said, look, they're not researching it in the United States. Most of the research is coming from Australia and Japan and the UK. And he goes, here's some great sites you can check into. And I became a moderator for a couple of Facebook groups that were started by British citizens. And then I started to kind of talk to Americans. And it really was kind of this cocooned experience of American intersex people really have no idea, because they've been living on and feeding on what they're being told by the American medical community for decades,
which is not
accurate information.
Yes.
And so you meet people and you think, oh God, like light bulbs go off and you get it. And then your heart breaks. And then you think less about for myself, I started to think less about myself and more about the people coming behind me and the people coming after me and the people that were in our community that don't have a voice or aren't aware of how to use it or how to connect with people. And I thought, I connect well with people. I speak well with people. I have a great platform already. Yeah, I have to swing to the full female end of my spectrum now at 43, and now I'll be 46. So that was 3 years ago. I turned 46 next month, and I think my life has never been fuller. My life has never been better, and I am both. I've read that on your Facebook page before. You are both. We're both.
Absolutely.
I've lived my life as both, and I feel internally grateful and blessed that I have gotten to live this life as both. And it's taught me so much about females and males, and I'm still learning every day. And the capacity for learning and growth is huge, and I'm just grateful. But going back to your question, when I found out, I could care less because my mind was in a different place. I was going somewhere else, and I thought, I'm lucky I'm not dead already. But because it was being presented to me as not being a big deal, I thought, okay, it's not a big deal. And then later on in life, when it was a big deal, and I thought, I'm dying, and the NIH said, if you don't go home and have your ovary and testicle removed and your partial uterus scraped and a hysterectomy, and you don't go on estrogen for the rest of your life, you'll be dead by 48. Then it mattered. Then it meant something, and it was huge. And then that's when I was like, okay, I get it.
Yeah, I found out at 45 because my health had been going into the toilet, and I was on my third round of doctors telling me that I was going to be dead in 90 days or less. And I don't know if you know how weird it is to sign the paperwork that says, yes, I know I will be dead in 90 days and I do not hold the doctor responsible. They've done everything they could. And the doctors make you sign that. And I've done that 3 times. And in that process, somewhere somebody mentioned that I was born with a vagina. And 5 years after that conversation, I was willing to accept it because I was dying again and I had to do something. So I accepted that. I started looking into that, started taking estrogen, and I haven't died in 10 years.
I feel healthier on the estrogen than I've ever felt.
That.
I feel healthier than I've ever felt. Do I still struggle? Absolutely. You know, I've been on disability for the last 5 years because of issues related to the XXY. And I finally said this year, I can't be poor anymore. I got to try and get a job and get back into the workforce. So I started this week at Family Dollar. And I thought, this may have not been the best decision. Now I'm thinking I'm going to become a stripper and apply at Spearmint Rhino. But I got to wait for my breasts at the end of June. But it's a struggle, but I've never felt healthier. And I feel like maybe it's time for me to go back into the workforce and build that reserve up. But the estrogen for me has been tantamount to feeling healthier and better, and to feel like there is hope and longevity in that. And I think it's important for us to mention in this moment, not every intersex person is going to have to transition. Not every intersex person is going to feel transgender. I don't identify as transgender. Not every intersex person is going to be a hermaphrodite. Some are, some aren't. Jesf and I were talking about this earlier before the show started. There is no pattern for intersex. Even when you find out that you have the same chromosomal variation. If I was sitting right next to an XXY, a fellow XXY, our medical journey would be inherently different.
Absolutely.
What Jesf has been through, somebody that's in the same situation he is, their medical journey would be inherently different. We are all different. So
well, I know somebody that had 14 surgeries to turn them into a boy, and in the end they gave up and cut it off after 14 surgeries.
Could you imagine having 14 surgeries to become a boy and then they cut it off?
Yeah.
I mean, I express all the time we're human first, and there's strength and knowledge in that we're human first, and everything else, when you think on a Christian level, if you're thinking about Christianity, we don't take this vessel with us. So when we die, our soul ascends, and we're done. You know, our body's done. And I'm guilty of it because I'm getting a new job in June, but we all put such an emphasis on what the vessel looks like, and we don't take it with us. And when you think about intersexuality, the soul matters, but everything else really is just a vessel. I mean, we're not taking it with us. So for the purpose,
that's kind of how I came up with the jacked up name you can't pronounce. Because it's Jesf, and because when I was up until I was 45 or whatever, I was Jeff. And then when I found out I was born with a vagina, I thought, I should be Jess. So I was Jess for a couple of years. And then I suddenly realized that I'm not either one of those people. I'm both of those people. And then so I took Jeff and Jess and put them together because they belong together, and I came up with Jesf.
Jesf, and I butcher your name all the time, so people don't write me and be like, you can't get his name right. I butcher it all the time. It's Jesf.
So, and I don't claim male or female. You can say non-binary, but that would assume that there is a binary, and I don't believe there is. I'm just intersex hermaphrodite.
And there you go. Well, I love that you're an intersex hermaphrodite, Jesf. And I also love that you're a good friend. I consider you a good friend of mine.
I'd say your friend as well.
And I thank you so much for being with us this week. In other quick news, the highlight of my week, I'm actually asked you guys too. What was the highlight of your week, Jesf?
GA paid early? Oh.
That works. That works. The highlight of my week thus far has been there is a local radio station here in Nebraska called 98.1. It's a national radio station. It's the Froggy Channel. It's a country western radio. And they have a morning show with Gary Greenwood and Nelson and Johanna. And so they call it Gary and Nelson in the morning with Johanna. And they have a segment every day called Send Us Something. And I've thought about doing it for my podcast, but essentially anybody can send them anything and they will open it on air. And so last week they were talking about how their radio station is right next to a dirty bookstore and they had not gotten anything dirty yet. So Just Juleigh here ordered them on Amazon, tassels, pasties with tassels. I ordered 4 and I sent them and they opened them on the air yesterday morning, on Monday morning, and Gary put on the red nipple pasties with the tassels and spun them, much to the delight of everybody listening. But I got a huge shout out. And later on this week, they'll probably open up the frog-shaped urinal that I sent. But that'll be fun too. But that's been the highlight of my week thus far. If you join us next week, we're going to have another rosé and try another rosé. And we're going to talk about next week Blair's story, which is she wants me to tell everybody about the meth head that came into Family Dollar screaming at me because she was going to a wedding. That happened this last week, and that is a very interesting story. Thank you for joining us this week for episode 13 with Jesf Benedict from Las Vegas. Everybody have a wonderful week. Remember to check out my Patreon. For more content, subscribe to justjuleigh.com. I love you all and have a wonderful beginning to your summer. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thanks.
For more content, follow justjuleigh.com. That's just Juleigh, JULEIGH.com. Thank you to our guests, and thank you for joining us this evening. Join us next week as Juleigh tries a different rosé.